This week, some general thoughts about professionalism and ethics. This week, there's a lot of reading. There is a book that you've already read from called Learning from Practice. They have 4 chapters on professionalism and ethics. I wanted to just give them all to you. I don't necessarily expect you to read every single word very, very deeply. It's quite a lot of pages. But I want you to have them. And I want you to at least be able to delve into the discussions that they have about how to apply professionalism and ethics, especially at your placements. I also didn't think we really had a good chance to talk about professionalism on its own. And so there is a chapter on that. If you were to concentrate on anything, I would concentrate on chapter 9. The reason I'm talking to you about your readings this way is to respond to people who may feel like, okay, this is going to put me over the edge. I already think there's too much work, and this is a lot of reading. So this is a really good time to practice the art of triage, which is something that every busy lawyer needs to learn to do. And it's something that I have learned to do all the way through my schooling, and that is really spot check the reading to get to the reflection questions. So if it's helpful to you to just work with the readings and the reflection questions at the same time, and sort of hunt and peck through the reading for the answers, because you don't have that much time this week, then that's fine. And that's something that there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're really finding the right places to get the answers. So you have my permission not to read every word. But I would like you to download or somehow keep these chapters, because I think there's a lot of really good real life examples and hypotheticals in the chapters that will really help you when if you haven't taken the MPRE already, or if you're on site someday, even when you're already practicing a couple of years from now, and something comes across your desk that you might have some questions about, and you're trying to figure out where the line is for something. The material in these chapters is really good. So, read them this week. You may go back to them at some point, and just know that they're there. Tuck them away and keep them for later. So the reason that we are coming back this week, even though we did cover sort of the main topics of ethics in the beginning, was you have had a little more time hands-on at your placement, and you have a closer relationship with your supervisors and the other people that you work with at this point. So when I first asked you questions about what you might project as ethical issues, you may not have really known how to answer that because you just got there. So now that we've been at our placements about halfway through the semester, you may have a different, deeper understanding of sort of what's going on, and you may be able to think about these topics a little better. So that's why we're coming back to it and taking a deeper dive into the issues. So I encourage you to, look at some of the fact patterns that show up in the readings. They tend to be in boxes, so they're easy to find. If there's one that is really kind of interesting to you, or one that you think, I'm not really sure how I would answer that, if you have a chance to bring it up with one of the attorneys at your placement or with your supervisor, that would be a nice topic of conversation, a nice way to get some of their advice from them in a very direct way. So it's not something they have to come up with to teach you. It's something that's a good prompt for them that would still give you some great training. So if there's one that you kind of would love to talk to them about, feel free to show it to them and say, hey, this came up in my reading. What do you think of this scenario? What would you do? Or what do you think is the right answer? And does anything like that ever come up here? Or what would be the equivalent here of this kind of a dilemma? And see what would happen, because this is where you start investigating sort of how these things play out in real life. So one suggestion on how to use the readings this week. So just a couple of thoughts on the actual topics of this week: professionalism and ethics. This was actually one of my favorite topics in law school. Where I went to law school, I went to Notre Dame Law School. They had sort of a thread, a theme throughout our whole curriculum, where no matter what we were learning, there was always a thread of sort of, is it the right thing to do? How does ethics come into this area of the law? And it was always a really interesting way to approach getting ready for this profession. And I thought it made us a little bit, sort of a little healthier, maybe in their mindset towards the profession. And I was really proud of that. And I think we have that in common at UB. I think UB is really good at that as well. And we actually really value civility and collegiality at UB and in Buffalo in general, and at in our alumni family. So I do think it's a wonderful place to become a professional and to have the right mindset in terms of being the best kinds of lawyers that we can be. So what do I mean by professional? And I'm going to separate the ideas of professionalism and ethics. I think they're two very distinct things. They're related because they're both about sort of being good, but professionalism and ethics are two different things. So you'll see this in the reading, and you probably have a good sense of this already, but what does it mean to be a professional? Not getting into the ethics rules just yet, but just when people talk about professionalism on its own. And there's a lot of ways to think about it. I'd like you to think about what you think it means for you. When you think about, are you a professional? Are you acting professionally? Do you have a high sense of professionalism as an attorney? What does that mean to you? And that, I hope, will stay in your mind throughout any thoughts you have and reflections on these things. But generally, it differs from ethics in that there's really no rules, right? You can't be really punished or sanctioned in an official way. You can't be just barred really for being unprofessional. There's overlap. Certainly unprofessional behavior oftentimes does violate an actual rule of ethics that you can be disbarred for. But on its own, it's really just a matter of, are you being kind of good, right? Are you moral? Are you doing the right thing? Are you acting in a certain way? And generally it gets a little squishy, right? It's about comportment. How do you act around people? What kind of reputation are you building? Are you engendering trust both with your colleagues and with your potential clients? Is that trust coming out of some behavior that you're displaying? And it can get really granular. It can happen based on how you dress, possibly. Do we want it to happen because of that? That's a question, right? But there's certain ways to dress, certain ways to look, certain ways to talk to people, formal or informal, certain punctuality. Do you answer people back by phone or email, in the right time frame? Do you forget to show up to things and then you have a sort of a sense of being unreliable? That goes to professionalism. So a lot of these things get, very muddied and very confusing and very intimidating, because as a junior lawyer, you're always afraid of making mistakes and you're never quite sure where that line is. You may want to seem confident and call all of your new attorney friends by their first name immediately. But at the same time, you don't want to seem like you're being disrespectful. So there are a lot of judgment calls to make, and there's a lot of discernment on your part that you need to start developing. And so, for example, can you go drinking with your office? And if they're all drinking a lot, and normally among your friends, you would also drink as much as they're drinking, is it a good idea to drink as much as they're drinking and act with them like you would act with your friends? I don't know the answer to that, but it may be something that you want to start thinking about. It may be a case-by-case thing, but you have to start developing that spidey sense so that you know what you should be doing. And then what is the upshot then? What's the outcome? If you do overdo it a little bit, then what happens? How do you react to that? If your supervisor's family member passes away, do you have to go to the funeral? I don't know. These are the kinds of things that you will start thinking about in the area of professionalism. So think about professionalism in terms of not only just sort of rules that you should follow because they're right, but also how power plays into professionalism. Some people are allowed to do things that other people are not allowed to do. You have to sort of earn your right to act a certain way sometimes, and that may be just and right, and it may not be, but it may also be how it is. How does bias factor in? There's a lot of overlap with implicit bias when we're talking about professionalism. Some people get away with certain things that other people seem not to be able to. So, the other flip side is, when does your attempt to be super professional cross over into people pleasing? In other words, when do you get to stand up for yourself if your position is right but unpopular, or needs a little bit of force to communicate when you're maybe not sure if you can use that yet? So these are all things that, as you do the reading, as you're on site, as you have mentors and you have supervisors and people that you trust that you can ask these things, you will start navigating all of these pitfalls that come with your professional reputation. And finally, why do we worry about our professional reputation? Think about that. That may be part of your analysis, and think about how you're going to analyze the levels of professionalism that you have. So ultimately, you want to be somebody who is trusted. What is, trusted to do the work, trusted to, so the clients will hire you, trusted that your behavior does not undermine your credibility and your ability to be effective as a counsel. So think about it. It doesn't have to be just, I don't need people to like me. It's literally, will your behavior affect your ability to practice law? That's it. Will you win the cases for your clients, or represent them adequately? Or will your own personal comportment get in the way of that? On the other hand, will the fact that you are impeccable in your professionalism make you the best possible bargain for your client, because they know when they hire you or when you represent them that they are getting someone who everyone implicitly trusts, or everyone's, that your reputation for being a fabulous attorney who's always right will carry you forward. So how is that going to work, right? What does that look like to you? That's part of your professional development and developing your professional identity. So think about those things as you're looking at the reading, and think about the hypotheticals. So we are, lawyers are sort of the fabric of society, if you think about it, right? The trappings of what keeps us together, whether it's, a farmer whose goat wanders into the neighbor farmer's yard and they fight over it, or writing a constitution from scratch. Lawyers sort of keep it all together. So if something happens to the lawyer's ability to do the right thing, all access to justice collapses. So this isn't just us saying, oh, you should be nice, or there's some rules that are kind of random. There's a lot at stake when we're talking about being professionals. So, and then obviously for your own selfish reasons, or for your own self-interested reasons in your career, the better reputation you have, the better you're going to do. So professionalism is a very interesting topic. So I hope you will enjoy delving into that, and it's not going away. It will follow you your entire career. Ethics we've touched on before, so I don't have as much to say about the ethical rules, because you'll take ethics as a course. So this is not your only source of that. You may already have taken it. Some of you may have taken the MPRE already, and that is the test on ethics that you have to take for every jurisdiction to be a member of the bar. You have to get a certain score on that to be able to be sworn in. So I'll just say a few things about ethics in general. Ethics are the rules. They're the rules of behavior, the rules of, if you will, sort of what should be done, what is the right thing. They cover areas that probably, maybe we don't need to be told, but they need to be written down. So, keep your client matters confidential. Do not tell other people things that someone has told you in confidence. Do not represent two sides of the same matter, because, you won't be able to be impartial. They're not that, they're kind of obvious, right? So, but there's a lot of nuances. They're not necessarily always clear. So some people say having rules, like an ethical code, the rules of professional conduct, actually makes people less moral, because it legislates a minimum standard that, everyone can just, they're fine as long as they hit the minimum, and it sort of leaves a lot of room for the best possible, the most moral outcomes. I think they're necessary. Obviously, if you've taken the MPRE, you'll know this. If you haven't, make note. There's always an answer on the MPRE when you take it. They'll give you a question about an ethical situation. There's always one answer that's too moral, that's wrong. It's more moral than the code requires. There's always one answer that is the most evil, right? It's so obviously evil, it's not even right. The answer is always in the middle, right? It's a very subtle difference between two answers that actually speak to what the code requires you to do. So, some people say, well, that's, too low a standard, but that's where we are. So you need some standard, and there's a lot of wiggle room. That said, there's a lot of room for hypotheticals. So the reading this week is on conflicts, confidentiality, and duties to tribunals and third parties. We had covered a little bit of confidentiality and conflicts at the beginning, only because you can get in trouble with those pretty early at a placement. So we made sure that we covered those. But duties to tribunals and third parties is something that you may or may not have seen that much of. And so that's a really, if you were to do concentrate on the second most important chapter, I would say do that one. The last thing I will tell you is, in addition to the readings, there is also a video. I know that some people learn better by that kind of just like more of a hands-on scenario. So the readings and the video work together. The video is actually referenced in chapter 10. So it is the one that they talk about at the beginning of chapter 10, which is the overview of how ethics plays in your externship. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It is definitely a, oh, thank goodness it's not me kind of situation. But one of your reflection questions is pertaining to that video. So gear up for that one. That one's a little bit of a hard watch, but definitely something that it will help you understand sort of what people do when they're not paying attention to ethical rules. So I think that's it for me on ethics. A lot of it is in the readings. Please do reach out if you have any questions. Feel free to continue to use the discussion thread, the ask and answer thread, if you do have anything you want to bring up or things that you think people might enjoy debating, because these are not always clear answers. And so, hang on to this material for the future. It's not something that you learn and put away. It'll continue to go forward with you.